I was a little bit busy considering it was my birthday today, so we've been doing a few things to kind of that have kept me a little busy, so I wasn't able to output this as fast as possible. So probably most of you are already aware of this, but Alphari was actually announced today that he's going to be signing a multi-year deal with Team Liquid, which obviously means that Impact probably isn't going to be the starting top laner for Team Liquid this year. I mean, I don't know where that encompasses where he's going to go. He's still a valuable Impact. I mean, kind of a positional player considering the fact that he's not an import on top of the fact that he's an extremely useful and extremely team-oriented weak side top laner. So I think it's going to be still a good pickup. But for the most part, it's going to really change the dynamic of what I would say is the kind of identity of the way Team Liquid plays. I looked up again. I don't usually like to pull up stats and a lot of stuff. I do think it doesn't really tell the full story, but I do want to it really is such a drastic story as to the way these two kind of players are a little bit different that I thought it was a good thing to look at. I mean, if we look at I think a big actual picture to point out right now, the big actual the most important detail I would say is the CS differential at 15 is actually such a drastic change from these two characters, these two players. If you look at Alphari's stats, he's usually up 18 CS to start off the match, 18 CS by 15 minutes. And if you look at the CS differential between Impact, he's actually usually down 1 CS. I mean, again, like historically and usually for this season, we see Impact on tank characters more so than anything else. Where so as we see Alphari is pretty much always on some sort of carry-oriented character. And we've seen him on Ornn a few times, and we saw the Malphite's good at the Renekton kind of situation. But for the most part, we see a pretty standardized. He's usually on a carry, where so his Impact is usually playing a low econ kind of top laner. If we look at the First Blood situation with the Alphari in comparison to Alphari in comparison to Impact, we see he's the number one focused top laner inside of EU right now. He 27.8% of the First Bloods in his games are committed on him. He's usually the First Blood Impact. Like for the most part, it's usually him getting focused, prioritized inside of the ganking potential. Ganking paths for the enemy team. We see a lot of organized kind of dives on his side. We see and then we see the 16.7, which is actually 7th to 8th place inside of NA. And honestly, for the most part, he also doesn't. He for the most part doesn't get any attention. Enemy junglers usually leave Impact on island because again, ganking him doesn't really lead to any kind of considerable weaknesses for Team Liquid. Honestly, if you focus Impact when he's playing something like Mordekaiser or Ornn, it's really not going to be an impact. He's still going to be tanky. He's still going to get to that power spike of giving them items at 14 and stuff. But again, when it comes to Alphari, he plays a lot of carries. Again, we've seen him on tank characters. Again, his Malphite was pretty decent. His Ornn's still a pretty solid idea, but he is a very high income, very high resource heavy kind of top laner, so it's really going to shift the dynamic of what I think Team Liquid's going to be trying to play. Again, for the most part, he wins his own lanes. Again, he has a very low amount of situations where I think that he's had about 6 First Bloods inside of the EU scene. He has a pretty okay amount of them. Impact does have one more than that, but I do think that comes down to the fact that Mordekaiser and Ornn were at points extremely overtuned for that. And again, his Shen is extremely good too. I mean, he has a very good KD on that. But for the most part, it's going to be, if we look at the damage percentage or damage share on his team, for top laners, Alphari has the highest out of the entirety of the EU scene. He has a 24.8% chance. I think the big thing about this right now, I think there is a big situation where we're going to see a shift in the way that Team Liquid plays because they're going to have they're going to still be able to play tanks, but for the most part, they're going to have a very lane-heavy, dominant top laner hogging up a lot of resources on the top side, and it's going to get to the point where, again, it's a gank-heavy bot lane. You really kind of need to play around where Core JJ and Tactical are, and you really kind of have to play around top, too. So at this point in time, we're going to see Jensen's going to have to take a step back in the amount of resources he's able to get, and he's going to have to take a step back on top of the ability for him to get yanks as often. Again, he still has the ability to coordinate dives with the top laner if he gets the proper picks with Galley or anything like that, or be able to fight skirmishes. But for the most part, we're going to have to see him take a step back in what I would say his traditional role has been since he's joined Team Liquid. He's not going to have that priority that he used to have. Again, when it was only one carry, it was fine. But again, resources are going to be demanded on more sides of the map now with Alphari. I think there's going to be a lot of good things that come out of this, though, which is first off, I do think that with the addition of Alphari, they literally do have a secondary threat now. I think that for the most part, you have Core JJ leading the early game, and then the late game shifts, and it's pretty much just tactical. But again, ADCs can only do so much with the team around them, and then we have Jensen when he's on the proper picks. But now we have the ability to shift the way they play. Jensen doesn't always have to be on a carry pick for them to be able to kind of function in the late game aspects of the game. They can try to shift the way they actually pick around them. Like scaling comps. They don't always have to pick a scaling mid laner to be able to play late game comps. I do think this is going to give them the ability to do that. They have the ability to play 1-3-1s more effectively now because, again, for the most part, they can only really play it with Shen. If you look at the win rates on Impacts, he had really good win rates with tanks and stuff, but when they started taking him off Mordekaiser and Ornn, he actually dropped substantially from like an 80% win rate in the tanks to like actually a 30% win rate on like the carry characters. Like, he really does make a substantially low impact on 1-3-1. What's it called? 1-3-1 build. Based characters, and it really does inhibit what kind of comps you can play. I do think this really does kind of broaden the horizons of what this team is going to be able to do now. I think they're going to probably by far and away be the best team in the league. Again, they already had the best coaching staff. They already again, it's arguable with the Cloud9 one, but again, with the inner turmoil we've heard, and again the Ezreal Yumi, I think it's probable this is probably the best coaching staff in NA, and it's really honestly at this point in time we have the best players considering that one of the top 3 mid laners in Bjergsen is gone now. Jensen is the only competition for him is Power of Evil and sometimes Yuxi, if Yuxi even stays now. So all around, I think this is a really good pick for this team. They're really going to have the ability to play around the map a lot more effectively. They're not going to be forced to play late game scaling team comps anymore. They can really pick up the pace at which they play the game now. They can try and push the tempo now because again with a late game kind of no priority top laner, you really are forced to have him as a team comp scaling tank player. Like you really can't play him as anything else. And I think this is one of the big problems we saw with Team Liquid at like Worlds. Again, they were kind of forced into a situation where they really consistently picked these late game scaling team fight oriented like teams. And at this point in time, I don't think this is a necessary thing anymore. We see probably, I would say, the most dominant laning top laner inside of all EU coming over to NA, which is unfortunate for you. Again, they breed a lot of talent. I really do feel bad for them. But again, this is a really good look for Team Liquid. This is what I would say is probably the best move they could have made. He speaks English. He's from Great Britain. Like, there's really not much you could do. He does count as an import, obviously, so you're going to have to get rid of what's it called? You're going to have to get rid of Broxa, unfortunately. Well, maybe not 100% unfortunate considering how he played, but I do really like Broxa. I think they're going to be missing a few leadership qualities that he actually brought to the team because the mentality of being able to bounce back from an 0-2 is kind of extraordinary to be able to do that. They were able to bounce back from that, and I do think it has somewhat to do with the mentality that Broxa brings to a team. But again, I think they have a lot more, their ceiling is a lot higher now. They have a lot more potential right now. And again, at this point in time, you obviously have to pick a fast-paced jungler. There's absolutely, there's nothing else you can do. You can't pick something stabilizing like Broxa, who's going to be able to impact team fights but be irrelevant in the early game. Unless the meta shifts to like sort of like if they take off tower plates and stuff like that at some point in time of the season and they try and shift the way that the game is played drastically, maybe that makes a difference. But again, without that being the case, I do think there should be a situation. There's going to be a situation where we see a fast-paced oriented jungler needing to be picked up for this team because again, they already have as it stands right now. Jensen is able to play that. Cordegia already does play like that. Tactical is pretty often. Pretty more often than not able to play around when Cordegia roams, so he's gonna be fine with that. I think all around they're gonna like the fast-paced jungler is one of the biggest problems we have in NA. I think the only two I would say are fast-paced are like Closer and like Dardoch. As no people like to say Santorum, but he's more so a weaker version of SOFM, where I think he does gank sometimes, but for the most part he's more objective oriented than anything. If we saw the matchups between Dardoch and Santorum, we did see a lot of situations where Dardoch, if you look at the first series in Team Liquid versus FlyQuest versus TSM, we actually saw a situation where Santorum had no ganks for the entirety of the series where so Dardoch had ganked pretty much every single game. Again, the big problem with Dardoch is the fact that he gets caught out a massive amount. This is one of his biggest problems in the mid game. He's really good at getting ganks and tempos going. He pants really well into ganks. But again, he says, if I can, like, sometimes he thinks, if I can get this gold in the enemy camp, it'll be a good idea if I can restrict him from getting it, because it's always a better idea to farm the enemy jungle more so often than yours, because instead of just getting gold, you're stealing gold for them and getting gold for yourself. So it essentially doubles the value if you take their camps instead of your own. But again, and he looks at value points instead of just purely, can I do this or not? And that's one of the biggest problems with Dardoch. But again, I really don't know. Do you try out a rookie jungler at this point in time? Like, you really do. This is going to be one of the biggest problems with this team right now, because you already have one of the single best player in NA, in Core JJ. You have one of the best ADCs. You have one of the best supports, and I think now you have the best top laner. So at this point in time, this is the role at which, or the way, the identity of Team Liquid is going to be shaped by what jungler they end up picking up, because I genuinely don't know who they're planning on doing. They haven't made any announcements for my idea. I've heard a few rumors, but again, rumors are not enough to go off of. I would not like to see Santorin. I really don't think he fits the identity of this team. I think he's a solid enough jungler, but again, at the same time, he really doesn't pick up he really has terrible pathing when it comes to international play. He won't get them in any he won't get them any international capable achievements. Again, for the most part, I really think they should go for a rookie jungler. I think that, again, maybe if a better coaching staff could fix Dardoch's mid-game problems, he'd be fine, because he really does have a really solid fundamental early game. But all around, I do think the problem right now with this team is going to be what direction they take when it comes to just actually finding a jungler. Because I think that Jat, for the most part, has been incredible for this team. They've had some of the most impressive turnarounds that I've seen out of a team, and whether or not they're able to do this at this point in time is going to be they have a lot to work with now. They have a lot more to work with now with the addition of Alphari. So whether or not they're going to be able to turn this into a winning team is going to be on the back of Jack, because he really has everything to lose at this point. They've gifted him a lot of talent, and if he can't make this work, then he really, as much as the success of this world's meant something, it's going to mean even less if he's not able to make an even more talented roster succeed. So I think he's really going to have to deliberate on what kind of jungler he picks up. All around, I do think this is a good pickup. I really feel bad for Impact. I really think he had a solid showing at Worlds, but again, for the most part, he was really one of the weakest part of this teams. He really did inhibit their ability to play around the drafting phase. So I'd like to see more out of him again. I don't disagree with the change. I do think he's a solid pickup for a lot of other teams, though. I think teams like FlyQuest could really use him. He's a better weak side top laner than Solo. I mean, to be fair, I want to point out, arguably during the season in Summer Split, people were arguing whether or not Solo should make the third team over Impact. And again, I never agreed with that. I think that for the most part, he had a lot of impact on his team. But at the same time, he genuinely, he really didn't have as much of an impact in team fights as Impact did. So it's really hard for me to say. He had a few solid performances when he first came to the season of the team, when he turned around FlyQuest by replacing Viper. He was really able to make this team succeed, and I really don't think, I don't really want that to leave a bad impression. I did think he showed spurts of talent, but for the most part, he's not as good as Impact in most situations, and he really was really substantially worse than him in international play. So if we want to see this team succeed, I think FlyQuest could pick up Impact. He's not an import, and on top of the fact he's a better upgraded version of the top laner you had previously. So we'll see what happens. I mean, this is a really good showing for NA. As much as we would like to home grow some talent, I think we can only do pieces of that, because really the massive discrepancy between talent between the regions, based purely, honestly, I assume because of numbers differences, is enough for me to say you can't really make a Worlds contending team with only NA players. So I think it's fine. I think this is a good pickup for them, and unfortunate for EU fans, there's going to be a lot less enjoyable talent come out of top lane, because it's going to be more of a non-lane he was the only lane focused top laner in EU, and it's really a tragedy to have to watch Ornn and Mordekaiser duke it out for 60 minutes straight. But I think that's pretty much it. I got nothing else to say, and I'm really happy about this change. I think it's solid for Team Liquid, but again, it does really kind of shift the dynamic of the team. We'll see what that does for it. And I'm like with what Jat was able to do this year at Worlds, I am more than happy to see what he's going to be able to do with this. But that's pretty much it. And see ya.